Today's lesson is about the Declaration of Independence, a very important document in American history, but also world history as well. There are 5 documents you must know to pass American Cultures class, and the Declaration of Independence is one of them. The others we'll learn about later on. There's also one date you must know to pass American Cultures class. You have to know July 4th, 1776, our Independence Day, the day America declares itself independent from Great Britain. Right now, you're here in Philadelphia at a building called Independence Hall. Down here in this lower left corner of the building is the room where delegates from states met or colonies met to write the Declaration of Independence. In every war, there are those who do the fighting, like the people here on the left, and there are people like Benjamin Franklin, John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, who do the thinking about the fighting. Today's activity is about those who do the thinking and the planning. Essentially, the Declaration of Independence is a breakup letter the Americans are sending to King George III, explaining why that breakup is necessary. You've already watched a parody song from One Republic called It's Too Late to Apologize. It's a really funny parody of people writing the Declaration and telling King George it's too late to apologize. Maybe you've heard people talk about what is your why? Why do you do what you do? Why do you live the way you live? Something important for all of us to think about is what is our why? Well, the Declaration of Independence is the why of the American Revolution. Why are we fighting this war? Why are we fighting the British against overwhelming odds? The Declaration explains that. The Declaration of Independence has several parts that we'll look at in the next few slides. Certainly, you must know that date, July 4th, 1776, is our Independence Day. The Declaration has a preamble, which is an introduction to the document. There are not fireworks in the introduction, but hey, they go along with the 4th of July. We learned the preamble to the Constitution in class, we the people of the United States. Well, the Declaration of Independence has a preamble as well. The second part of the Declaration is a declaration of natural rights. Those are rights given to you by nature, not by a government. In America, we believe that those rights are given to you not by a government. Therefore, a government should not be able to take them away from you. You have these rights because you're a human being and because you're alive. One thing Thomas Jefferson wrote in the Declaration is that all men are created equal. Now, that's an interesting term for a man who owned over 100 slaves, but that's another discussion for another day. Thomas Jefferson wrote that all men, meaning men in a generic sense, men and women, that's a kind of language they used in those days, are endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights. That's a big word that we don't really use in our normal everyday 8th grade language, but those are rights that cannot be taken away. Among those rights are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Mr. Jefferson goes on to explain some of the grievances or the gripes or the complaints we have against the King of England and the British government. We've talked about many of these in class. We've learned about those unfair tax policies. We've learned about the Quartering Act, where the government was putting troops in people's private homes and towns and forcing Americans to pay their expenses. The government has even been killing our people. We've done the Boston Massacre story. We've done the Lexington and Concord story. We've done the story of the first year and something of the Revolution. So these are included among 20 some other grievances or complaints we have against the king. Jefferson finishes the Declaration of Independence with this resolution: these united colonies are and of right ought to be free and independent states. All political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved. When something is dissolved, it's gone completely. It can never be recovered. Like hot tea and sugar. Pour that spoonful of sugar into the hot tea, it will dissolve, and you can't get it back to be sugar again. Oh, really clever, isn't it? Tea Act, Sugar Act. But that's the way America sees our independence. Our relationship with Great Britain has been totally dissolved. It cannot be recovered. This is the room in which the delegates to the Second Continental Congress wrote the Declaration of Independence. You may have seen this picture before in our SLO of 30 pictures we've done back at the very beginning of the semester, and we'll do 2 more times, showing a 1700s kind of look with chairs, big windows, no lights other than candles, felt tablecloths, and the like. These are the 5 people who formed a committee to actually write the Declaration of Independence. Thomas Jefferson did most of the writing. This piece of artwork is in the United States Capitol Rotunda, where President of the Second Continental Congress, John Hancock, is seated in the chair. He's listening to these 5 present their declaration. And this is the name of the piece of artwork is called Presenting the Declaration. The members of the Congress are sitting waiting to decide what to do, whether they should accept independence or not. If they do, this will be more or less a death sentence for them because they are committing treason against the nation of Great Britain. But the Congress agrees to accept Declaration of Independence and declare themselves independent of Great Britain. Thomas Jefferson's face is on the $2 bill. If you have a $2 bill, maybe you have one in a drawer someplace at home. You can get it out and take a look. That same piece of artwork is on the back of the $2 bill. Presenting the Declaration. Caesar Rodney is a famous citizen of Delaware who's cast the deciding vote in favor of independence. Delaware state quarters have Caesar Rodney riding his horse back to Philadelphia to cast the deciding vote in favor of independence. There's a Caesar Rodney High School in Dover, Delaware. Their mascot is the Horseman. The members of the Congress signed the Declaration of Independence. John Hancock, the president of the Congress, signed it really big and supposedly said, there, King George ought to be able to read that without his glasses. So we still equate his signature on the Declaration of Independence with a person's signature. If somebody asks for your John Hancock on something, they're asking for your signature. Interesting thing is Benjamin Rush, right here, is a doctor in Philadelphia who signed the Declaration of Independence. His story, part of his story, is in a book that some of you may read later in our semester called Fever 1793. There's James Smith, who's also a signer of the Declaration of Independence. He's from York, Pennsylvania. In fact, there's his house. It's still here. It's owned now by a counseling organization where you can go for family or personal counseling. James Smith is buried in York, Pennsylvania at the First Presbyterian Church. There's his grave marker. Signer of the Declaration from York, Pennsylvania. The Declaration of Independence has had a huge impact worldwide. There are many, many, many other stories of people wanting more freedom, more independence from their governments. This is Egypt a few years ago, and all these little dots are people protesting for greater independence, greater freedoms. Same thing in Libya, a country not known for its freedom at all. These people are protesting in Germany, although you'll see their sign is in English. This is Iran, again, a Middle Eastern country that is not necessarily a free country. These people are protesting for more freedom. Same even here in Washington, D.C. There's the United States Capitol building, the people marching towards the Capitol to protest for more freedoms. There's a demonstration that's been going on since 1981 out in front of the White House. Where people who want to ban nuclear weapons, or even this picture is from 2019. Also, these folks are, I believe it's a women's march actually in the winter of 2019, January 2019, marching in Washington, protesting for greater freedoms. Catalonia would like to be independent of Spain. Hong Kong would like to have more freedoms from China. Even in Antarctica, people protesting for more freedoms. Based on our Declaration of Independence. You kind of wonder, what in the world do you have to protest in Antarctica where nobody even lives there permanently? But all of those protests based on the philosophy of our Declaration of Independence. And maybe you're even familiar with the National Treasure movies where Nicolas Cage has to steal the Declaration of Independence to keep the bad guys from stealing the Declaration of Independence. So this document is very, very important, not only because, well, good stories and movies take place, but because it is leading the world in wanting more independence and more freedoms from government. Finish with this. Congress, the Second Continental Congress, wrote the Declaration of Independence. Thomas Jefferson did most of the writing. They approved it on July 2nd. Many of the members of Congress signed on the 2nd, 3rd, or 4th. July 4th is the day we use as our Independence Day. Now, what does King George think of this? Well, he kind of laughs at it. You know, the American Revolution has been going on for a little bit over a year, but the war is nowhere near over yet. The Americans will have to win that war before they can truly be independent.